inshallah, in the next hour or so, if I've done my job right, I've given you sort of this picture of what's going on in the American Muslim community in terms of philanthropy. And then that information hopefully equips you with how to chart a path forward. And I've been able to give you some next steps that you can walk out with in order to advance your organization. You know, in the for-profit world, we often talk about growth, and we talk about scale, we talk about increased value. In the nonprofit world, we talk about advancing the mission. How do we advance the mission, whatever that mission is? That mission could be, hey, eliminate poverty. That mission could be, you know what? We just want to make sure every Muslim youth is comfortable in their skin with their identity. Right? Whatever your mission is, we want to eliminate domestic violence. Whatever that mission is, how do we advance it? And so in the social good world, or nonprofit world, NGO world, it's about advancing that mission. But first, let's take a look at American Muslim philanthropy, and please forgive me about these words, American Muslim. You could say American Muslim or Muslim American. You know, I don't mean anything other than the fact that I'm talking about 3.5 million people in the country who are saying that they are a Muslim. So here's something really cool that made me feel really proud, by the way. I said, alhamdulillah. Turns out American Muslims or Muslim Americans, alhamdulillah, we contribute more than our population size in relation to total American giving. American Muslims donate $4.3 billion, mashallah. Okay, 4.3, that's no joke. In 1 year. Some of you who know me, you can tell my voice is a little hoarse. I just did 7 countries in 3 weeks teaching and presenting. And when I go to other countries, and I say American Muslims donate 4.3, they're like, whoa. Okay? That's a lot of lira, that's a lot of pesos, that's a lot of, I mean, pick it. Mashallah, 4.3 billion. If you break that down though, in our study, and this is from the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative, where I also have been part of, 44% or $1.9 billion is going to non-faith organizations. All it means is we said, hey, are you donating to what you believe as is a Muslim organization? That's how the question's framed. How much do you donate to what you believe is a Muslim organization? Regardless if it was 501c3, 990, whatever. That person who filled out that survey said, I give 56% of our giving is going to faith-based institutions, the Muslim nonprofits, Muslim masjids, but 44% going to non-faith. So when I say I'm proud of something, this number here is 67% individuals, 3.26 billion. So if you took all American individual giving, it's 3.26 billion. And if we're giving 4.3, we're actually 1.3 and some change in that. And we're only 1% of the population. So you see, we're giving more. And that's been picked up by the news. It's been picked up not only by the news, it's also been picked up by other major non-Muslim nonprofits that are now building zakat strategies to fundraise. Talk about that in a minute. We're very diverse in what we give to. I hear a lot, and I don't have a lot of time to dig into this, so I'm going to keep quiet.
I question that $4.3 billion collected from in America from the regular people and organizations. This money, how many organizations collected?
So if we and I don't want to dig into the data here, but keep writing it down. That's a good question. And some of these I can even follow up with afterwards, no problem with each other. I want to empower you guys with tools. So first myth, And the first thing I want you to remember in your mind is mashallah, our community gives, there's a lot of giving. Okay, so that's the first piece. Second piece I want to land in your mind is when I'm working with Muslim nonprofits, and now I've worked with over 1,000 in the States alone. They say, but people give to international relief, they don't give to this. They don't give to this, but they give to this. Well, this answers that question. Turns out, yeah, you're right, about 35% of that when it comes to faith giving was to overseas. But there's still 20% for youth and family services. 40% of the 1.8 billion dollars is a pretty good chunk for the youth and family services. Civil rights, still 23%. American Muslims still care a lot about our civil engagement and civil rights. Domestic relief, 30%, huge chunk. American Muslims are really starting to care more and more about domestic relief. These are your soup kitchens, these are your weekend, programs, these are your returning citizens programs. I'm just trying to think of examples to open your mind to that. But religious research still. American Muslims are like, what, we need to figure out how to make sense of this in our lives here in America. And that's what, like you see the Yaqeen Institute and some of those ISPU, those other research institutes out there, Triple IT, that's where the research, people care about research. And this is where that non-faith stuff comes in. So still a big chunk is going to Red Cross, the relief organization down the street, the booth in the mall, could even be the Christian organization, the faith-based organization. I will tell you though, whenever I surveyed my students and said, what's one of the things that is affecting your fundraising the most, and they often say competition. They say competition. And then I follow that question up with what competition? And let's say other Muslim organizations, other masjids, we're trying to raise money for our masjid. There's a masjid down the street raising money. The other one down the street, they have a school they're raising money for. The other one down the street, they're raising money for a burial site. And there's just too much competition. There's too much competition. Turns out, our research says donors don't see it as competition. Donors actually love to see collaboration. However, my colleagues who study this stuff, and we're looking at the sector as a whole, the Muslim giving sector as a whole, turns out to say the greatest threat to Muslim nonprofits today is actually nobody in this bucket. It's actually this bucket. St. Jude's now has a zakat program. UNICEF now has a zakat program. 2 weeks ago, I was at the Faith International Fundraising Conference. And they had fundraisers from around the world. And they had all types of workshops and sessions. The one session that had the most people in it, lined out the door, was on fundraising for zakat for your institution. But the only Muslim in the audience was me. He didn't hit you yet, did he? He didn't hit you yet, did he? Everybody's like, what did you say? Non-Muslim organizations are receiving zakat fatwa from ABC, whoever, and those organizations are targeting zakat giving in the world. Right? And the research says almost half of the money in America is being given to non-Muslims. So two takeaways. A, this is your brother Tayyab Yunus. Can you take some? Don't look at your brothers and your sister organizations as competition. The science says it doesn't exist, and your brother's asking you to think that. Number two, it's not that they're raising funds And the audience wants to give there, it's that we're not raising funds. We're committing something called donor abuse. Donor abuse is when you over solicit and you don't steward, you don't, some of you took my classes, and you don't steward, and you don't cultivate. So if you want to address this problem, we want to shift. Truthfully, we don't want to shift, we want to grow both pies. We're trying to get everybody done. If we want to grow both pies, then we need, and we don't want this to shrink and all this money to go here. We need to do a better job in how we think and in how we engage with our donors, how we engage with our donors, how we run our nonprofits. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. This was a Zakat study that we did as well. Zakat, let's see, 1.8 billion of this pie was Zakat. So it turns out that the majority of Muslims still believe that Zakat should be given to a Muslim organization, but the shift is happening now. The shift is happening. So the majority of the pie in the first slide, majority of this pie was Zakat. Majority of this pie was Sadaqah. With me? But these organizations are looking at this pie. And they're deploying Zakat strategy. They're getting fatwas. So it also means is that we're actually not collecting as much sadaqah as we could. We're not collecting as much zakat as we could because of how we fundraise. Right? Think about it. $4.3 billion. Some of the largest charities in the Muslim community right now that we can think of, if you combine Islamic Relief, you combine taking on all of its units and chapters, you're maybe at 300-400 million. Maybe. But that's nowhere near $4.3 billion. That's a beat. You see what I mean? All right, you guys see how the money shakes out, right? Next. There's 8,000 Muslim nonprofits in the US and much. Majority of those, by the way, if you watch the graph, it starts after 9/11. Dr. Islam Baghi does the Masjid census every 10 years, and there was about 20% growth in Masjid from last decade to 2020. 92% are still less than $1 million budget. I mean, not more than a quarter McDonald's. And we're trying to save the planet, save the Ummah, fight off, the Muslim youth suicide crisis with a couple $100,000 and 3 volunteers. We're trying to, solve the void here on all these kids on a couple $100,000 and a few volunteers. Right? 3,000 are masjids. And here's the sad part. Dr. Baghi's report says those are closing. And he said primarily Black Muslims and Latin Muslims are in the neighborhoods. Whereas our Indian brothers and sisters built palaces in the suburbs. Not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, it's a thing. Right? But we have to address it. 30% of them are failing after 10 years. That's disappeared. 30% are failing after 10 years. They go 10 years, just living along, a couple of employees, few $100,000. 95% of nonprofits have fewer than 2 full-time employees, and the majority are stuck in startup. The good news is Muslims are new here. Muslim nonprofits are new here. That's the good news. And we, mashallah, have gone a long way, long way since we got here. I'm really grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's allowed me to meet many founders of organizations. And it's a pleasure to have these deep conversations with them. And when you listen carefully in these conversations, it's going to be in one of my books, is that they talk about how they landed here and looked around and said there was nothing. A home. So they built these homes, a place to gather to fulfill this need of affinity. Right? But the long-term strategy on what we do in those brick and mortar spaces They all say, but they didn't think about it, because I always say, I'm talking these 60, 70-year-old doctors, engineers, I call them the founders of the American Muslim Institution, 8,000 nonprofits. So that means there's 8,000 founders out there, and 8,000 founding boards out there, and 8,000 founding funders out there. You guys got the word founder now? Founders, founding boards, and founding funders. We all know who they are here in Miami. We sure do. Right? When you have a conversation with them and you say, hey, when you look back, you think about if you could do one thing different today, based on what you know back then, based on what you know today, what you do different back then, they would say we would have been more intentional about our programs and not just building brick and mortar for sure. Right? Not that that was a bad thing. Stuck in startup. So Muslim organizations are in this startup loop. Striking startup. We're going to talk about that too a little bit more. You see, startup isn't enough to get the impact. That's the thing. We want they feel empowered to say no. They feel empowered to say no. Right? We want to see, all types of heroes leading business, for profit, Muslim civic engagement, civil leadership. That's the impact, right? But you can't get there without infrastructure. You can't get there without really knowing what's your core program. I went back to my MBA, to get an MBA in 2014. One of my professors walked in and he goes, what's KFC known for? Chicken. And he said, they have that fried chicken down to a perfect science and they don't leave you. That's their core product. And my professor said, when you think about your businesses, what will be your core product? When I got to the nonprofit school in 2016, a few years later, they said to all the nonprofit leaders, what is your core program that is driving transformational change? What is your core program? This question right now, what is their core program that is actually driving transformational change? One of the signs of startup is you have a lot of little things going on. Not one thing that you're really building up. And that's okay to have a lot of things going on. That's okay. But at some point, you got to say, no, we're going to hunker down on this. We're going to really focus on this and build up from it. Right? So, first and foremost, those of you who are nonprofit leaders here, who drive home tonight, our core program across all the experiments. We tried a Sunday school, we tried a halaqa, it worked, it kind of didn't work. We got Jumma kind of going, we got Fajr kind of going, we got a few salats kind of going, we got a youth program. Okay? And people think you just build a gym and everyone will come. It's not like Rome, you build it. It's not like that. Okay? In the community space, and the church has figured this out, and the synagogues figured this out, it's actually transformational experiences that bring transformational experience. But when you drive home tonight, think about what is going to be your core program. And your core program is a different class, but your core program is drawn from your core competency. That's what you focus on. Core program is drawn from core competency. You leverage your core competency and you build one strong foundational program. Once you've got that program in place, you build infrastructure and you drive that program to impact. Then if you want to roll more experiments out, you can do that. But make sure you have one program that's driving value because donors support value. Donors will eventually stop funding your experiments. That's research-based. Donors will eventually stop giving to your fundraising gimmicks. They will eventually stop funding your experiments. They eventually want to see real value, real transformational change. Okay, you guys good there so far? Now, to sustain that impact, capacity is needed. The capacity is essentially, strong management, strong governance, talk about governance, financial resources, and administrative system. So as you think about your organization and your program, you say, do we have the capacity? Do we have the bandwidth to do this? Working with an organization earlier this week is another thing. We started an endowment, awesome. But we're stuck at like 500,000. Okay, what happened? Well, people stopped giving to us, so we just decided we're going to do an endowment. Now we have 500,000 sitting in a cistern account. And it's basically giving us pennies every month. I'm like, yeah, we didn't strategically think about, are you ready for that? And now the board is going in circles thinking about, what do we do with this anemic endowment? So you have to be very, very critical and think strategically in how do we build excellence, which is part of our being, excellent, right? Excellent. Whatever we do, we have to deploy excellent. Now, capacity is needed to fundamentally sustain the institution as it goes. Now, here's a sad part. You guys are like, whoa, you're already making this. Fewer donors are giving more to Muslim nonprofits. Some of you are like, wait. We're studying thousands of nonprofits right now, and what we see is while dollars raised are going up, the number of donors going down. Average gift size increasing. Anybody, what does that mean? Fewer donors are giving more. You're squeezing your founding funders. You're squeezing your founding funders. And if all you're looking at is a gas needle, and you're not watching the transmission temperature, you might blow your transmission, right? So you ever rode or sat in a diesel truck? All the dashing, or seen it go to airplane, we'll look over and see the cockpit. All the dashes, right? They're watching everything on the plane, not just out the window. So if all you're watching is the fundraising dollars, and you're celebrating your dollars, you might be losing donors. And you might be squeezing the few you got. We're seeing this more and more across American Muslim institutions. This is a consequence of a lot of things, but the primary thing is how we fund it. If anybody wants their data analyzed, I'd be happy to do it after today, inshallah. This is why they stopped giving. This is research-based. First, they want to know you can execute on something, that you're not going in circles, doing the same thing over and over again. By the way, what is the largest demographic of the Muslim community? 3.5 million Muslims. What's the largest demographic? Anybody? Muslim Hispanics? What else? What else? There's a breakdown right here. It's actually millennials. Millennials, born 1981, but I was born in 1980 and I consider myself a millennial. So we'll just say 1980, okay? I'm 42. So millennials are the fastest growing and largest segment of the Muslim community. And the majority of them are husband and wife are both working, good salaries, they have good paying jobs, usually 70 to 150,000, and then about a 200K income household, 250K income household. And they have a couple of kids, 2 or 3 kids, and they have different interests. The other thing I would tell you is 60% of them don't attend the masjid. 60% of them don't attend the masjid. So if you took every masjid in the greater Miami area and you took the occupancy and you counted how full or empty they were during Jummah, you could get a very accurate count of that 30% crowd. A very accurate count of 30% accurate count. If I were you guys, I would come together and I would fund a study through South Florida Muslim Federation, and I would actually study South Florida Muslim. I would actually do. I would get intentional about that and do a study here in South Florida to really understand it. And I would get every one of the nonprofits that participate in that and share that data. It would make every organization far more effective. You could create categories based on everybody's projects over the next 10 years. Fund the study, deploy the study, and then over the next 10 years, share that out. And these you said you wanted these projects. These organizations are working on these projects. Here's their links, here's their links, here's their links. You would see philanthropy. You would definitely see philanthropy grow. You guys good so far? Okay. They want to be confident of the organization's management and leadership. By the way, the first part, can execute on a plan. These millennials want to know you have a plan. Remember those two pies in the beginning? That money is moving here because Muslims, we don't show our plan. So it's a fi sabilillah, house in Jannah. MashaAllah, millennials are very optimistic of Allah subhanahu. Okay, so that money is moving from Muslim pie to non-Muslim pie because their strategic plans are on the board, on the wall, on their website, and progress and updates. That's called transparency, which is what you need for students. Okay? Number two, they want to be confident of organizations, management, and leadership. They want to know you got a team that can execute. I'm a basketball fan, sorry, Heat fans. I grew up in the 80s. I had a brother who loved Houston Rockets, another guy who loved the Celtics, and I was a Bulls fan. We always fought. My team got 6 championships. But anyway, people bet on the Bulls because of the team and Phil Jackson and the management. Right? You knew they were going to win every single time. Of course, I did. Because of the entire management structure. Research actually says donors want to see end-to-end management of the organization. They want to know you're not just waiting. They want to know you're not just a volunteer organization. That's sort of part-time work. 2 weeks ago, I was in Rome. And it was the first time conference, the Faith and Philanthropy Conference, hosted by the Pope. And they had Muslim philanthropists, Christian philanthropists, Catholic, and Jewish philanthropists there. If you're reporting, just don't share this out. Like Jeff Bezos was there, and these Muslim billionaires were there. I met a guy, I can't give you his name, and he told me he lives in Miami. He just liquidated $650 million in assets and moved to Miami with his 2 boys in Miami. Anyways, in this company, I should have accidentally slipped that out. They got a flight at 7, whoever gets me right to the airport. No, just kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. But anyway, at this conference, there are two things I'll share. One off topic, one on topic. Fair? The one thing off topic that I thought was interesting, and don't share this out, was the representative of the Pope. He said, and these are my words restated. Okay? He said essentially that for thousands of years, we all didn't get along. Right? Again, I'm simplifying it in my words. He said for the next 1,000 years, we have to come together against the common enemy. He said the common enemy is indifference to God. He said Christians, Jews, Muslims, and Catholics, we must now, the next 1,000 years, come together against a common enemy, which is indifference to God. Now the thing that's related to today's topic, in each of those conversations, we basically had a series of meetings at the Vatican. Muslim philanthropists, we had a track where we were meeting with Muslim philanthropists and having conversations and focus groups, you know, what academic nerds do like me. And the majority of the conversation was, birthday, this guy was in my birthday. I can write $1 million. But how many of your Muslim organizations know what to do with it? You can actually make impact with it and not waste it and fight over it, argue over it. This is a guy who's worth about $700 million. And he wasn't the only one who said that. We've got to get more intentional about building strategic plans and assembling a team. Baseball teams are great because they have a GM that does what? The team does. That's what a board chair does. That's what a board does. Board puts the team, isn't the team, but puts the team together. Puts a plan, puts a team, says, go execute, give us a chance. We'll talk about that in a minute. They want to visualize the impact of their gifts. I do this a lot. You have to show impact, and show impact, and it's a bunch of emails and postcards and mailers. Know that the other donors are making gifts. A little bit harder for Muslim organizations because you know the left hand can't know what the right hand is doing, but there's different ways to do that. The number one reason is over solicitation. Over solicitation is, yeah, have you ever had that friend who says, hey, can you give me a ride to the airport? You're like, yeah. And then you see him again, and hey, can you give me a ride to the airport? Next time you see him, can you give me a ride to the airport? And eventually you're like, man, the only thing this guy wants is a ride to the airport. Right? It's called donor abuse. Donor abuse is when every time you see your donor, you just say, hey, can I need $10? Really need $10. Really have this project. We really need $10, otherwise the lights are going to. We really need $10 because we have to build this parking lot. You know, so we talked about this. The largest and fastest growing segment is millennials and their children. You guys remember, again, the Bulls, Dennis Rodman, you know, or you can use Wayne Gretzky when they were asked what made you so good. Rodman said, I went where the ball was going. That's how I got the most rebounds. And he was the greatest rebounder in the NBA. So if you're planning, plan for the future, like really, truly. Stanford University has a report which says it's called the nonprofit starvation cycle. Nonprofits get stuck in startup, get stuck in scarcity when there's an over-attention on tactics for today and problems of today, rather than a board that looks out ahead and really understanding their market. So you really got to understand your markets. We talked about this, 60% never attend the masjid. This is the interesting part. They're still very philanthropic. It turns out that American Muslims, the issue isn't that they're not proud Muslim. MashaAllah, you meet any of our kids, you know, I mean, even mine, I have 6 kids, alhamdulillah, trying to get them to go to the masjid, like, I have to, like, bring all types of tools of motivation. Build your strategy. Use the data to build your strategy. That's where I'm landing you. So if you're going to write something in your notes, forget everything I said, your action item, use the data to build our strategy. Use the data to build your strategy. Yeah, this was interesting. This is a research that's being done out of Southern California right now, UC. They don't believe they're able to find the answers for faith challenges in their question. They go to find their answers from online lectures. YouTube has replaced many of the conferences and conventions. Right? Like you go to conventions nowadays, the halls, they're all not there. They're somewhere else. But if you talk to anybody at a convention, it's like, yeah, I follow shit. I follow shit. I follow Rabah, right? I follow Nancy Tamara. Everyone has some teacher, some shit, and a lot of that is on YouTube. But guess what? Our study showed that the number one search, the number one follow person is number so globally. They're just finding the answers to their dean from these people. Like, all right, let me move this. Sorry. Yeah. Now, here's as growth stagnates, nonprofits fall into scarcity mindset and remain in charity mode. The two words I want you to think about and reflect on later: scarcity mindset and charity mode versus growth mindset and development mode. Charity versus development. Charity this is research based. Strengths. Nonprofit continues to just doing charity, you create a lot of friends as an organization because then it feels good. Development, though, rests on the fact that until we actually remove obstacles, people have the ability to help themselves. What are the obstacles for Salah? If Salah is our core program as a masjid, and what is our strategy in identifying the obstacles that bring people into Salah? Not the parking lot, because we only need that on Friday. This is the development mindset. Charity mindset is, well, we have a parking lot, we have a masjid. Want to pray, they can pray. Whoever wants to pray, they can pray. The rest of them, we may go for them. That's charity mindset, even for Salah. But development mindset is what is Salah, our core program, as a nonprofit. Yes. What are the barriers our community, the 3 zip codes around this masjid, what are the barriers they are experiencing that prevents them to come? How do we understand that? And how do we remove those roadblocks? That's development. This mindset, it's charity mindset versus development mindset. Now, I'm not saying an organization can either be charity or development. You can be both. You can be both, but be strategic about it. Be strategic about it. Going back to that first slide, if you really want impact, then you have to identify your core program and be super intentional and super strategic about it. Right? So scarcity versus growth mindset. Scarcity mindset, board members see opportunities, but lack a strategic path. If you're in a board meeting where everyone comes up with new ideas, we can just do this. Oh, we can do that. I have a friend who has this, we can just do that. This is key opportunities, but we remain in incrementalism. This is research. These aren't my words. These aren't my words. None of these slides are my words. All knowledgeable once upon a time. Somebody else did a PhD and research this stuff. All I did was collect it, contextualize it, and present it to the rest. Board members, they lack a strategic path, or they remain in incrementalism. Downward pressure by donors happens. Downward pressure by donors to reduce overhead costs. The lack of measurable impact associated with strategic goals. When you don't have a strategic path, you don't have a core program, you're not creating value, and you're not stewarding donors like, what's your program, what's your program. The research actually says it's a transactional relationship and not a transformational relationship. So you initially have transactional relationships with your donors, it happens, but you want to move them to be transformational partners of your mission. Right? So that because that happens though is in a growth mindset. In a growth mindset, the board pockets charity work and development work. It's charity work and development work, but we're not doing this and we're doing this. Or vice versa. Doesn't matter. It's strategic. Focusing on strategic growth and is intentional about inclusiveness and finds resources to fund the path forward. Boards create strategy, they're strategic, and they go out and find resources, either human or financial or technological. That's all you need. Right? Human, financial, or technological. You get a bunch of people, and then you get the money to buy the stuff you don't have. Simple as that. But the board goes and gets resources. I'm going to talk about boards in just a minute. Advancing nonprofits isn't possible without a board. It just isn't possible without a board being a board. It just isn't possible. It's very hard. Very, 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 very hard. In startup, I'm going to qualify. In startup. Turns out there's 3 stages in a nonprofit board's life cycle. I'm going to send you this article afterwards because it's a research article. I'm going to pull it up. So these are the 3 stages. I know you can't read it. This might sound like some of you guys. Maybe, maybe not. Just self-reflect. Just process. Just process. Organizing boards, that's stage 1. They're small in size. They're usually made up of people the leader knows. There's usually a strong commitment to the vision of the leader. Board meetings are informal, operational in style. Generally not task-oriented. Members agree to take on tasks without questioning. And they usually don't play a significant role in fundraising because they expect the leader to do this. Happens a lot in founding masjids and founding organizations. This is not a bad thing or a good thing, it's a thing.
And it is true.
The idea is, this is research that has studied nonprofits. Our job as leaders is to understand where do we fit and where do we want to go? And how do we build that path forward? That's all, right? Number 2, or B, organizing boards that lead or control organizations. Members, they played a role in creating the organization. Composed of determined individuals. They're small, still homogeneous. Board meetings are informal still, task-oriented. There are still participating in fundraising, but they're apprehensive about hiring staff due to a member's sense of ownership. Transition to working staff is tough as board members serve as volunteer staff members. Board members serve as volunteer staff members. Staff leaders may have to wait for some time before they are trusted. Right? Transition to a governing board. Right? Following boards and staff may experience the following. So this is when you're transitioning. And then we go on to stage 2, the middle stage, the governing board. The board shifts from performing operational staff-like tasks or from relative inactivity and cheerleading to the gradual assumption of governance of the organization and responsibility for its well-being and longevity. Right? I'll send you guys this whole article and you can read, it's a research paper, you can read through this. This is from Board Source. Committees become essential to effective board functioning. The board accepts responsibility. Staff accepts its accountability to the board. This is when you're transitioning. Then the last one is the mature state or the institutional board. The institutional board is where you want to get to. This doesn't happen overnight. It is a gradual process. The point, don't get stuck. That's all. It's okay to go through these stages. They're, like a baby has to learn to walk, and then learn to run, and learn to speak, right? Learn to write. Similarly, your organizations are organisms, right? Just don't let Shaitan convince you that you've succeeded. That is when I see truly organizations fail. That's called the success mindset, right? One of my mentors, a non-Muslim mentor, he said, "Tayyab, remember, the arrogant mind is not learning because it doesn't ask the right questions." I mentioned this to one of my teachers and scholars from Medina University. He basically said, "Wow, you guys don't imagine what we know from Islam is Allah puts the value everywhere. And if you don't ask the right questions, you won't see the impact." Isn't that wild? Yeah, because you'll reject information. You'll always say, "I know." You'll say, "That doesn't apply to me. It doesn't work for me. My situation is different. They don't understand me." The mind rejects the knowledge. Right? So the key lesson from this, I'm going to send this to you, inshallah. I'll give it to Brother Samir, Sister Sana, so you can assess your organization in terms of where it is in its process. We're going to do QA after Maghrib, inshallah. I'm going to keep plowing. I think we have like 5-10 more minutes left. All right, so you guys good? You're gonna use this document to assess the board to see where you're at. You guys good? You got a macro picture of the market. You guys know a little bit about what's going on. I've advised you to study your market. Every masjid has a market. Your organization has a market, a sub-market within a bigger market. And that's okay, right? I always talk about my mom. My mom, for example, if she's a donor in your organization and you send her a printed annual fund, she's gonna call you and say, why are you wasting donor money? Right? On the same hand, if my brother is a donor in your organization and you send him a printed annual report, he's gonna appreciate that. He might even study and ask for a meeting. He might even ask you to have a conversation and want to learn about what things he can fund next. But people, even within our big tent, if I can use them, our big tent, 3.5 million Muslims, and how many there are in the greater Miami area, there's also sub-markets. You can't be everything to everyone, but you can be amazing to some. And that's who you take along, who you serve. Those are the markets you serve. As part of strategic planning. If your board feels like this, you're not a high-performing board. If you have one person pushing and pulling everybody else. Well, it's a lot like that because you're all volunteers on the board. Most board members are just volunteers. They're professionals, they're busy jobs. And then all of a sudden you're asked to go be a board member and do things for this organization. That's hard, right? But remember, you're not a board until you're collectively meeting. The board's called to order and you have an agenda and you work in the agenda and you're making decisions. There's a whole other class I teach on the dysfunction of organizational management of nonprofits. And a big piece of that is how nonprofits power gets displaced. In for-profits, you have a CEO and a line command. The power is right through that cord. The nonprofits power gets displaced. The employee silos of power, donor silos of power, board member silos of power. Right? Individual founders are silos of power. And these different silos of power will push and pull the organization. What you want is you want everybody moving in the right direction. One of my favorite books, if you're writing it down, it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of Team by Patrick Lencioni. What he talks about is that people think that there's trust in an organization. But if everyone's guarded and there's silos and back channeling, you actually don't have trust. So if you know that there's back channeling and silos and lobbying and getting everybody on the page before the meeting, there's a problem. And when you want to build this trust, and the way you build trust is by modeling vulnerability, leading with vulnerability. But this book, Patrick Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of Team, is the best. It's 150, 200 pages, fast read. It's a fable, like he tells it in a story, and it's really, really good. Real quick, a board is to power an organization. Something to remember, when power rests with individuals, the organization is at the subjective use and potential abuse of power. Okay? And how you solve for that is a good governance system. A really good governance system is how you solve for power. So boards focus on governance, hiring and firing the CEO, and resourcing the organization. I used to say they should go fundraise. But I meet these board members like, I'm not a fundraiser. I'm just an engineer. So then we changed it to, you know what, you don't need to fundraise, but you need a resource. Resource means you identify connections and make introductions to your staff, to your ED. Let them run with the introduction. That's what resourcing means. So if you're in this room and you're a board member, you want to be continuously making introductions for your executive director. And I'll give you a quick soundbite. This is what I use. I travel a lot. I meet a lot of strangers. I meet friends and family too. And they'll say, hey, and usually people are like, hey, so what's your name? You say, the next question is usually either where are you from or what do you do? Right? Governance. When I was a kid, my dad used to do tafsir with us every night. Right? And there was no way we were getting out of it. He used to explain to us, right? We're 8 kids and we grew up in the panhandle of Florida. You haven't noticed my accent. It's 10 miles off the Alabama state line, town called Bonneton, right north of Panama City Beach. And he used to do tafsir with us every night. And he would always say, the Quran is the policies of it. It's the guidance. That's what policy is. And then he would say, the hadith is how the Prophet ﷺ proceduralized these policies in his context. And he would say to us, it's up to us to then look at the policy. If we don't know how to proceduralize it, find the hadith to understand how the Prophet ﷺ proceduralized it, and if it was the same or similar set of context, it was a safe bet to follow it perfectly. But if we couldn't make a perfect sense of it, then we needed to make sense of how we would proceduralize it within this clause. Nonprofits work the same way. You have to have policy in your organization to guide it after you're dead. Forever. Right? It'll guide the organization so that power doesn't get displaced. Right? And this policy is what the board focuses. Policy is what the board focuses. Then you give the staff or your CEO or your executive director, their responsibility is to proceduralize this policy, day-to-day context of the organization. So everybody good on governance? Policy and procedure, you know it, right? You good? So now, we'll keep moving fast. This word governance, by the way, it's a French word that comes from, it just means rudder. The rudder on a boat. Where is the rudder on the boat? It's on the back. Why do they use both? Have you ever driven a boat? Yes, it's hard. Water, current, wind, weight, everything. Just like your organization. Donors, volunteers, board, people, bills, government policy. Right? It's like the ocean. So the rudder's on the back because the rudder is keeping the boat, to land where it needs to land. So the boat's not going in circles. Governance is the rudder. It keeps the boat moving in the direction that it needs to go. Now, what do you need for that? Well, you need vision, part of your governance. Clear future state. Don't do technical jargon with it. Number 2, purpose. Why do we exist? And be able to answer the opposite of that if we didn't exist. Policies, we talked about that. Policy says we are a nonpartisan organization. Now, 10 years from now, some Democrat shows up. Well, sorry, we're nonpartisan. If you don't have this, what happens? Whoever's got the hook up on the board, the swing it. One party or the other. That's subjective use of potential abuse of power. Right? Policies keep the rudder on the boat moving. Mission, how are we doing? And good missions are usually in 3 leaps. We are rebuilding the identity of the American Muslim youth by connecting with them, by understanding their superpowers and unlocking their talent. Connecting, rebuilding Tawheed, right? Unlocking their civil service. Right? Just 3 things. 1, 2, 3, and build excellence on it. Corporate strategy. Corporate strategy is we're focused on millennials, or we're focused on elderly, or we're focused on this, and we're sticking to that for the next 3 years. And the next 3 years, what's our strategy? Strategy is what are we going to prioritize all of our resources on so we don't go in circles. What are we going to prioritize our resources on so we don't go in circles? That's strategy. Whew. When you're developing your programs, I think, 2 more minutes. When you're developing your programs, just write this down, use logic models. Use logic models. When you're developing your programs, use logic models. What inputs do we need? What activities for what outputs? Outcomes are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is for you. What are you delivering to the world? Let Allah do His thing. Okay? Inputs, activities, and outputs. That's how you build your programmatic structure. I was just the head of USA in Rome. They use logic models. I was down the street with a startup nonprofit. You got to use logic models. And that should flow into your budget. Your budget should have your program, it should have all your line items. Hire and fire a CEO. You know, you definitely, and CEOs are different. Don't think you're going to find Superman, Superwoman, that's going to do it all. It doesn't exist. Right? Plan an HR strategy and plan phases, year over year growth in that strategy. You're not going to just go hire some magical person that's going to do everything. You plan, you say, this is our HR strategy for all our programs. What does year 1 look like? Year 2 look like? Year 3 look like? Let's build it. Donors will fund that, by the way. I can show you examples later. And resourcing. We talked about resourcing the board. We can pick up on that after Maghrib, inshallah. Sounds good? That was a lot. Right before the Maghrib time.